This week on Theater Talk.
The trick is to trust when the time comes that the technique will be there. If on one of those nights it just is not happening,
Right.
your technique will support you and carry you through.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation.
From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post.
And I'm the show's producer, Susan Haskins.
I'm delighted tonight to be joined by one of the great actors, F. Murray Abraham, who is about to open off-Broadway in a terrific production of The Merchant of Venice. He's been doing this for quite a while now, and there's been a lot of talk about Al Pacino's on Broadway, but I urge you to see this one. A colleague of ours, Jim Shapiro from Columbia University, Susan, who was on the show to talk about The Merchant of Venice a couple of months ago, said he thought of all the Shylocks he's seen.
I'm fondest of Murray's.
F. Murray Abraham.
F. Murray Abraham plays a Shylock that scared the living daylights out of me.
And Jim has seen a lot of Merchants of Venice, and you know Jim.
No.
And you know he has studied this play for years and years. He said, "But you're the Shylock."
When we did this originally here in New York, it was a hit, and it was successful, and we sold out right away. Mm-hmm. But when we took it to England, Stratford-on-Avon, we were a big success there too. I'm not really just patting myself on the back. It was a great thing for the American actor and the American theater that the Brits really not only accepted us and our production, but they embraced it.
That's very interesting, though, because there is this feeling that sometimes you get from the British actors that Americans just really can't pull off Shakespeare as well as they can.
Well, you get a lot of that from the critics. I think the public accepts us.
Is there anything to that at all? I mean, well, British actors have more of a feel for it than some American actors do?
They have their feel for it, and we have ours. And I think that we have a lot to learn from each other.
Weren't you
Diplomatic
compared?
answer.
Yes, I was going to say, weren't you compared favorably with Olivier by
Yes,
British
I
in that
was.
role? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
By one of the leading Shakespeare critics in the world.
Oh, well, that's pretty good.
I'm shameless. I'm so sorry. But I'm very proud of that. I liked Olivier. He was one of my idols.
Absolutely. What is your attack on the role of Shylock? I mean, when Jim Shapiro was here, he said, there's no two ways about it. It's an anti-Semitic character. Do you play up that aspect of it? I
think what makes it a universal piece is that it's really about an outsider. It's about much more than anti-Semitism, which it is. Mm-hmm. It's an anti-Semitic play. But I can't imagine making this Shylock a universal character if I think only in those terms. Mm-hmm. So I sometimes would think of him as a Palestinian in an Israeli court, or an American Indian in an American court in the old days, or on and on. It's a universal expression of a need and a search for justice. Everyone understands that. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I try to put into my character, into this wonderful, amazing man, Shylock. And
what about the villainous aspect of him, though? Because Shakespeare intended him as a villain, and you must have fun with that, with making him the bad guy in some ways.
Well, I suppose this is the big trick that Shakespeare pulled off, because until Shylock, Jews had never been depicted as anything but villains and devils, not even human. This is the first time he was endowed with human qualities. And I think the only way to temper that for that society then was to allow it to be anti-Semitic, but also human. It was a huge breakthrough.
Because you certainly understand why he has a grudge. And you certainly you bring out, all the very real grievances that this man has and how he's been treated very shabbily.
It's hard to imagine what it would be like to be vilified in the streets, legally, spat upon, kicked, beaten, and put up with it. And not only that, but succeed. And that's what he's done. But I think there's a lesson to be learned in that. The thing about my Shylock is he is not out for revenge immediately. He really just wants to establish a place of dignity. And that's what the pound of flesh begins to be. But when everything is taken from him, when his daughter is finally taken from him, then I think he turns to revenge. That makes him, I think, much more palatable and acceptable and understandable to a current audience. Everyone has experienced feelings of revenge, I think. I think I'm safe in saying that. Indulging those feelings is quite another thing.
But that's an issue in the play, though, too, that when this man is the outsider and he has the moment of revenge, it has to be tempered, and he can't temper it himself. He's going to go and he's going to kill for it.
I guess it's a passion that any of us who have been carried away with any kind of a passion, whether it's love or hate, we find ourselves in the middle of this thing that we know is terribly damaging, and we just can't stop ourselves. It's just this pull to do this evil, bad thing, and it's like sucking a sore tooth. You can't stop, and it finally destroys him, I think. And the worst thing about it is that he knows it's going to help to hurt his society of Jews that lives in Venice at the time, but he still can't stop himself. And he's a deeply religious man, but he still insists on doing this thing which his religion is absolutely against.
Right.
Is cutting into another person's flesh.
And yet he justifies.
He just can't stop. He knows when he commits himself to it that he's damning himself.
Why do you think that Shakespeare, if you know, with this being the tragedy of Shylock, puts that comic turn in the fifth act, and ends the play the way he does?
You're asking a question that critics for 400 years have been trying to work out. It's interesting how it's been treated. There was a long period of time where that act was cut.
Oh, really?
Yes, Shylock's exit was the end of the play. So however you work it out is really up to you. And I think that's one of the values to seeing both of these productions, see Al's, who's a friend of mine, and mine, because they're quite different productions.
Yes, they are.
And quite different performances.
Have you seen Al's?
Oh, yes.
And does it influence you at all? I mean, how do you?
No, that's his.
Yeah.
Mine is mine.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of respect for each other. We're both very serious.
Have you talked about playing this role with him?
No, but I dropped a note off to him. He's making a flick right now. That I would like to have a conversation with him about it publicly, so that, because I could use some publicity. I mean, he's using up all the audience. I want people to know that this is a great chance to see two Academy Award-winning actors, serious, devoted actors,
doing one of the great roles of all time.
Exactly. It's never, historically, it's never happened
Well,
before.
Al will just say, if you'd like to come on Theater Talk with your friend F. Murray Abraham and devote a whole show to playing Shylock, you're welcome anytime.
And let's hope that little paper, the New York Times, gets onto this idea too.
Yeah, that's a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Speaking though of other Shylocks, you have seen other great Shylocks before.
Oh, yeah.
In your mind, the best?
Well, I have to say mine.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, of course.
I
I was just going to say, aside from yours, was there one you saw as a young actor, young man that?
So many. I think I saw Olivier's.
Well, I wanted to ask you, what was
It
Olivier's
was
like?
terrific. It was terrific. I happen to be a big fan. Some people didn't like it.
Yeah.
I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah.
There was that wonderful other British actor, wonderful actor. What's his name? We talked about.
Oh, Henry Goodman.
Henry
You
Goodman.
saw that one, yeah.
He did a thing. I'm not going to do it. I'll do my own thing. But
Yeah,
he
yeah.
did a thing I've never seen before in the trial scene at the end of the Quality of Mercy speech, where when she got finished making this beautiful appeal, he didn't do a thing for about 10 or 15 seconds. Just sat there, and you wondered, is he going to let it go? Is he going to go for the pound of flesh? It was a very courageous thing to do.
Now, when you are
I do something quite different.
Right. I was going to say, when you're putting together your Shylock, having seen all these others, do you say, I can't do this, I'm not going to take from that one, I'm going to do something deliberately different because I've seen other actors do it and I don't want to repeat it?
Listen, I'm a highly technical actor. I really do work hard on the work, and I do a lot of research and so on. But I'm an instinctive actor. I'm absolutely instinctual, and I really allow it to carry me wherever it is going to go. Even during a performance, I just let it take me. It's a pretty exciting ride. Doesn't always work, but when it does, it's thrilling. It's thrilling to see an actor who's willing to take those chances.
Well,
it inspires other people to do the same.
That's the only reason to do it, though, right? I mean, what's the point of getting up there to act if you're not going to roll the dice and see how far you can go with it?
What you're saying is absolutely true, but to commit yourself to it is a little dangerous and fun. That's why I do it.
When you say sometimes it doesn't work out, can you give us an example of a performance that you did where it didn't work out and the choice you made and when you realized it had gone wrong?
Well, sometimes you get to a point where you think that you're inspired.
Yeah.
You'll go in this direction with it. And you get in the middle of it, you think, this is crap. And then you try to pull yourself back and you get back on track, and it happens.
So is that what you mean by dangerous?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the danger.
Yeah.
It's much, by the way, it's much like in baseball, if a pitcher has a no-hitter going into the 7th inning, you're not supposed to talk to him. The other players pretend like it's not happening. They just ignore it completely. It's in a great performance, if you're in the middle of it, if you ever stop and say, this is a great performance, it's gone, baby.
Yes.
How interesting.
And if you commit yourself to that kind of, if you trust that instinct, if you trust that inspiration, that's where the great performances come from.
I love to talk about acting, and since we have you here, one of the great actors, I want to touch on what you said, though. You are instinctual, but also technical.
Yeah.
Is it not true that to really pull off a performance, to really be a good actor, you always have to have that technical ability running sort of alongside your instinctive ability?
Yeah.
And how does one sort that out? The running with it and yet knowing if I lift my hand this way, I'm going to get this kind of laugh. If I look that way, I'm going to get that kind of laugh. How do you keep the two things in your head at the same time?
Yeah, well, that's the trick. I think that is the trick. The Japanese technicians, when they have assistants, when they have apprentices, they're not allowed to touch the work for at least 2 or 3 years. They are just assisting, watching, learning, before they even begin to touch, whether it's clay, whether it's pottery, whether it's the theater, so that when they do finally get an opportunity to perform, whether it's making something or acting, all of the technique is there to support whatever they do. And you never stop working on that. I'm talking about vocally as well as spiritually, by the way. And that's the trick, is to trust when the time comes that the technique will be there. If on one of those nights it just is not happening,
Right.
your technique will support you and carry you through. And you get to a certain point where the performance is always good. When I say it's crap, I don't mean it's really crap. Used to be, but now I can get away with stuff, you know? Because I've been doing it for 50 years. I mean,
Right.
I should be able to do it, you know?
But you know when it's not working, but you can fool the audience.
Oh, God. And sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you think this is awful, and then people come back and say, that was terrific. And sometimes you think it's terrific, and they say, you know.
Well, that terrible experience with the little acting I've done, that you're observing yourself, and every moment you're going, that's terrible. That's terrible.
She's right.
Yeah.
That is bad acting.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it, too.
But teaching the technique, though, it seems in the way acting goes nowadays that people just want to plunge in and become a star, because a lot of young people get a TV show, they get a movie, and you know they're an instant success, and then they come to Broadway and they try it, and you see the technique was never there.
Yeah, you can spot it immediately.
You can spot it in just the sound of a voice. That's not a stage voice.
I think you can spot it as soon as someone steps on the stage.
Really?
It's an aura. People go, oh, damn, this. We're in for a good ride here. This is a good thing. You can tell. You can smell it. You can feel it. But I also think it's one of the reasons that there were so many suicides among, and still are, among artists, performers, who have this enormous amount of fame.
And get built up, yeah.
Built up, and they really, really think they know what they're doing. And in fact, when it starts to taper off, they got no place to go.
Right.
They have nothing to rely on. They're completely lost.
But
And they-
isn't that a corruption? I mean,
Oh.
you walked away from Hollywood. Not didn't walk away, but you didn't move to Hollywood and become that. And did that have something to do with this very corrupt system where they kind of destroy psyches and lives with the fame system?
I don't think it was that altruistic. Thank you for putting me in that category.
Oh.
But it's just that the stuff that was offered was such crap.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was a lot of money.
But it's the money, yeah.
I just said, no, I'm doing all right. You know, I want to stay here and do my work.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because it was Amadeus, you won the Oscar,
Yeah.
and then you started to get the Salieri roles. Is that not what happens? They
Isn't
keep
that
giving
funny?
you the same sort of thing? Oh, you're going to be the scary,
No.
menacing villain.
It's absolutely true. For the first 15 years of my career, I was only doing comedy, all comedy.
Yeah.
And as soon as Salieri happened, it's just been all like sinister villains and stuff. And I'm funny.
You're such a funny guy. I have to say, I've never met you before.
You got to see the Ritz. I mean, you got to see it. It's a wonderful movie.
You were in the original Broadway production and the movie version.
Yeah.
But it's funny you say that because you're really quite funny and charming. But my image of you is Salieri, and I thought, interviewing F. Murray Abraham, and I was a little intimidated because there's going to be the demonic Salieri.
Funny.
Why did you decide to become an actor? How old were you? What was the impressionable moment in your life where you thought, I got to be looked at?
You know, this thing about how you become who you are is like a mystery sometimes. In my case, it really is, because I was a hoodlum. I was a gang member when I was I'm from El Paso, Texas. And it was Pachucos in those days. And my friends were all Mexican, Chicanos. And I speak Spanish. And I spoke with a Mexican accent. And in these gangs, which were the precursors of the Bloods and the Crips, we were not as violent as they were. I mean, I was never in a fight where anyone was killed. But at 16, a teacher said, try this. Don't ask me why or what she saw. And it changed my life.
What did you try?
It sounded like a pretty fun idea. A lot of girls in the theater. But no, I'm making a joke. It just seemed to communicate to me. And I went to a play. I saw a guy I knew was on the stage, and I was transformed.
Do you remember what the play was?
No, I don't. But I remember the first play I did that
Which
was
was?
successful for me, which was The Old Lady Shows Her Medals, which we took into a state contest in Texas.
Really?
And I won, and got a scholarship, and I went to school. Otherwise, I never would have.
The Old Lady Shows Her Medals. I've never even
It's
heard
a
of
great
that.
one-act play.
By?
J.M. Barrie.
Oh, right. Yeah. And that was it for you. A J.M. Barrie play transformed your life.
Absolutely. That woman did. Teacher.
Yes.
What was her name?
Lucia P. Hutchins, God rest her soul.
And she
I
saw.
am forever indebted to her.
And she saw something in this.
She saw something that I didn't know was there. That's a teacher.
But isn't it interesting that a teacher transformed your life and you have remained a teacher yourself?
Yeah.
Even though you have a very successful acting career, unlike so many, you've gone back to Brooklyn College and become a master teacher of acting.
Well, I think it's a tribute to her.
Yeah.
Thank you for pointing that out.
Interesting.
That's very important to me.
Where did you get your? When did you realize, as a young, you were a teenager acting, winning awards? When did you realize? Oh, I got to get some technique here too. It's not all just winning awards and having a good time. It's work.
I just knew that there were things I had to change. Being in a gang and then separating from the gang is very hard to do. It means you really have to change your life. So I began to listen to what I sounded like, and I knew I couldn't be an actor with a Mexican accent. So I started to listen to recordings, which I still have. Old recordings of Barrymore. I have vinyl. I have Barrymore and Olivier and Gielgud.
Really?
I still have them.
So you trained yourself how
Yeah.
to speak without an accent by
Yeah.
listening to the
Yeah.
greatest actors in the English language.
And American.
And American.
Barrymore.
Right.
Yes, I did. It's not a big deal. Just do it.
I just have this image of you as a little gang member putting on your Laurence Olivier record.
Yeah, I got some scars to prove it.
Did the gang try to pull you back in?
Oh,
or
yeah.
What did they make of your doing acting in
Oh,
the
it
play?
was derisive. It was a lonely time, but I knew it was right. It was like a calling. I really believe it was the hand of God. I do.
And Ms. Hutchins.
Yes, through Lucia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You started out though doing comedy, as we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? I mean, what was the first comic role that you got? And did you think, well, this is what I'll be doing for my life? I'm a funny guy.
Yeah. Well, I guess I always like to tell jokes. I suppose that's part of it. But I think if I had a choice, I'd only do comedy.
Really?
Yeah. For one thing, you can't fool yourself when you're on stage and you're doing comedy. You can't say, oh, this was good, because if they're not laughing, it's not any good. I don't care what anyone says, how good it's got. They have to, you can trick yourself when you're doing tragedy because you don't know. You take it for granted. And besides, with tragedy, even if it's not real good, the message of the play gets through. It's going to affect someone.
Right.
But with comedy, well, I'll tell you. I did Macbeth. And while I was doing it, my wife at one point said, I can't live with you like this. She's a very good cook, my wife, Kate. 50 years we've been together. She cooked a lot of stuff. She said, it's in the freezer. I'm going to the house in the country. Goodbye. She said, I was moaning in my sleep. I was thrashing around. I was snapping at her. She said, goodbye. I'll be back in a couple of months, weeks. Really. So comedy doesn't affect me that way.
Well, how does your Shylock affect you? How's your wife putting up with your Shylock?
I love Shylock, except for that thing that he commits himself to, the cutting of the flesh. I'm devoted to his passion and to his humanity and his need for justice. I hate that these guys who almost brought our country to its knees have gotten away with murder, that no one has been brought to task for this banking system that they've destroyed. No one. That's my sense of justice.
That's good.
And that's what I feel with Shylock. He says, I stand for judgment. Answer, will I have it? Well, will the American people ever have it?
Nope.
When you were doing the comedy and then you got Salieri and suddenly you become F. Murray.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
I was doing the Amadeus and Scarface at the same time.
Wow.
I was flying from Hollywood to Prague
Wow. How'd you keep your head together with that?
because they're so different.
Yeah.
If they were subtly like close, it would have been difficult. But this was like one was a vacation from the other.
Wow.
But my point in saying it is that they were both released pretty close
Yes.
at the same
Right.
time. But no one remembers that it was that close. They remember, oh yeah, you did Scarface, but they always remember Salieri.
How did you get that part?
Just luck, good fortune. I think every actor in the world wanted that part.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was the hottest play in the world at that
Big,
time.
I mean, the greatest stars. You could bankroll a film on their names and reputations. So, fortunately for me, Milos had something else in mind. Thank God.
And it was you.
It turns out it was me and Tom Hulse.
Did he have you in mind for it originally, or did he have you in mind when you went to audition for him?
We'll never know. I saw him a couple of times, and then suddenly they say he wants you to read, so I went to see him. I don't know if he knew exactly what he had in mind until he just came across the actor he seemed to have fit. That's a lot of courage, because that was bankrolled by one producer, all his own money.
Really?
Yeah, but he had that same producer success with Cuckoo's Nest,
Yes,
Right.
sir.
Who was that producer?
Zantz,
That's right, right.
and
right.
that took a lot of balls.
Did you
Now-
read a lot? Did you read a lot for Milos though? Did he put you through a lot of auditions? No, just
Once,
once.
yeah.
And
One
We
audition.
taped it once.
So you did it once for him, and did he give you a job on the spot, or was sort of no?
Did you remember where you were when you heard you gotten the lead in this gigantic?
I was painting my kitchen
Really?
in Brooklyn, yeah.
And they called you?
Yeah, and I still didn't believe it. I didn't. It was written by a Brit
Peter
for a
Shaffer,
Brit,
yeah.
you know, who's a friend now.
Yeah, wonderful man.
And he is, isn't he? He's
Yeah.
a great conversationalist.
I love Peter. Yeah. But it was just saying, written by a Brit for a Brit, and you thought there's no way I'm going to get this
No.
part. That's going to change my life.
No, it's like they were going through the motions for some reason. You know, they had to see some American actors, you know. And I was nobody. You know, and they called and I said, yeah, well, okay, you want me. I want you. And I said, okay, what's next? He says, well, now we have to talk to the writer. And I said, well, it's fine, thank you. I've got to finish painting my kitchen. I've been asked to consider Scarface, and you know, Al was partly responsible for me getting Scarface, by the way, Al Pacino. He
Why?
and Brian. I mean, they
Brian
were
De
working.
Palma, right?
Yeah, they had to agree. And I did the audition. They said, look, we want you for this, but we kept saying, can you hold off because Amadeus may be in the. So they said, okay, we're going to give you till such and such a date, but then we have to have an answer. And I needed the money. I got a family and little kids, you know. And they wouldn't come up with it with Amadeus. So I said, okay, I'll do Scarface. I mean, of course I would. Be glad to. It's a good movie. And then I went to LA and we're working on Scarface. And they called me when I was on the set. You got the part. It's just like Hollywood. You got the part. Bells are ringing. You got the part. I said, and that's when I got scared. Because I was really a crusader for American actors. I still am.
Right.
American actors are as good as anyone in the world. Anyone. I guess you can sense my pride.
Yeah.
But I said, okay, now you got to prove it. Now you got to deliver, baby.
You got to show those
And
British actors that you're as good as they are in this part.
Even now, I get goose pimples when I think of. I swear, I get goose pimples, because I was really scared. I said, you better be good. And I went home and I started to work while I was working on Scarface.
Because it was Paul Scofield who played Salieri originally.
It
The
sure
great
was.
Paul Scofield. Did you see that performance?
No, he never came to America with it. He
I
didn't
know.
want to come.
You know, it's funny you say that because I remember talking to Peter Shaffer about that when he died. I said, Peter, how come he didn't come with Broadway? And he said, well, I went to him and I said, please, Paul, we would love you to come to Broadway. And he said, Peter, It's the time of year when my wife and I go to our house in Scotland and we paint our shutters.
You see?
And that was it.
You see?
That was it. So he was going off to paint when he turned down the role,
His shutters.
and you were painting your kitchen when you were offered the role. Amazing. All right, listen, it's been great talking to you. F. Murray Abraham, one of our terrific actors. And you can see F. Murray Abraham in The Merchant of Venice. He's playing Shylock. It is
A scary Shylock.
A scary Shylock at Pace University's Schimmel Center for the Arts. And you're going to tour with this Merchant of Venice, yes?
Yes. And I really urge anyone who thinks of themselves as a serious theater goer to come and compare this production with Al Pacino's production. It's a rare opportunity to see two Academy Award winners do the same great role.
And you're going to be in Chicago with it, you said?
Chicago and Boston and in Santa Monica, theater that Dustin Hoffman built.
Who did a Shylock too, if I'm not mistaken, on
Yes,
Broadway
he
many
did.
years ago. Interesting. F. Murray Abraham, thank you very much for being our guest
Thanks a
tonight on
lot.
Theater Talk. Great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Alan S. Gordon Foundation, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.